Hey, it's Tony Sweet and Trisha Carr.
Hey, nice to be here, Tony. Thanks for having me.
It's been a long time. Captain Ron is on assignment, so he couldn't make it, but we have a great show for you guys today. We are excited because this is a returning guest. He's been on our show. It's been several years ago. And the question is, I grew up in the Midwest. You grew up in Texas, right?
Yes.
So we were, born Christians and the Bible Belt. And we've always heard the word Satan. Satan is always, there's always a negative, energy around it. And we've always heard really negative things about, Satan, devil, Church of Satan, they're worshipers and they sacrifice. And so when I had this gentleman on a few years ago, I was really taken back as like, wow, these are just normal people that just, worship the way they worship. So I'm going to introduce our guest. We have Raul Antony on the show. So are you there? How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for being back on the show. And I'm glad I have Trisha here because she's also an intuitive, a psychic medium, and she grew up again Christian, like I did.
I actually raised myself Christian, though. My family was.
Did you really?
Well, my mother was in stark fear of the way she was raised, which was all fire and brimstone and everything. So she was terrified of the belief she was raised in and was just certain that she was going to hell. And so it was actually a kind of rebellion. I started taking myself to church when I was 11, but then I left the church when I was about 18, 19 years old.
Wow, so you become an adult and
and then I was like, wait, what?
All right, so Raul, how did you grow up in a Christian family at all?
Well, my family was Catholic, but they weren't really strict about it.
Right.
They were kind of Catholics that would go to church when things were tight, and otherwise, they kind of skipped on, keeping the Sabbath. So it wasn't that much of a thing growing up. I did go through Sunday school and I did go through confirmation and all that stuff. Mainly out of respect for my grandparents. My grandparents were a little stricter Catholic, and we had a pretty good upbringing. So, they kind of wanted me to go through those steps as I went through it. Ironically, it was in the process of going through confirmation where you have to study the Bible
right
more closely and reaffirm your faith. That I actually became atheist.
Wow.
You read it well then, I guess.
Yeah, I did. And, there's all this talk about, studying the Bible in school and that nowadays. And I'm thinking, well, sure, because that's what led me to atheism. It's probably going to happen to a bunch of other people as well. But yeah, it was an experience I had with a teacher, a Sunday school teacher, who said, well, the communion, that's you're eating the body and blood of Christ. And I thought, well, yeah, sure, but that's really, wine and bread. Like, no, that's literally the body and blood. And if you don't believe that, you're gonna have a hard time. And so, those kinds of things kind of led me to, doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Well, atheism is, like most people know, usually don't believe really in anything. They just think,
they don't believe in religion
like
or
an entity or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, the stands for a God, stands for God. So yeah.
So where did you do the switch from atheism to becoming a member of the Church of Satan?
Well, I was actually introduced to Satanism at about that same time. I had a friend who was an atheist, and he kind of knew the way I was, and he thought, well, we grew up in tough neighborhoods in New York City. We kind of knew the law of the jungle kind of thing. We knew the kind of things that you had to do to survive, and you had to view people as slightly evolved animals, and you kind of had to navigate around that kind of situation. So we already had a very carnal, realistic view of things. So when he knew I went to atheism, he gave me the Satanic Bible and said, hey, you should check this out. But at the time, I was just coming out of a Catholic background, going through that, swinging all the way to the other end seemed very reactionary to me. And I wasn't ready for that. So I took some time, just called myself an atheist for a while. And then it was later into high school that I was exploring underground music, underground culture and art that I kept on encountering Satanism again and again. Other artists that I respected, musicians, painters, and sculptors, they were Satanists. And I went back to the work of Anton LaVey. I went back to the Satanic Bible, Satan Speaks, and all his other books. And actually, most importantly to me was The Black Flame, which was the Church of Satan's print magazine that was in circulation at the time. And to me, you had these books that came out by LaVey in the 60s, but this magazine was current. It was in production. So it showed to me that the organization was still around, that people were still practicing it, and that the opinions in that magazine varied. You had people from all kinds of backgrounds expressing different ideas that didn't always agree with each other. So that really reinforced the philosophy of individualism in me. And it reinforced the idea that it's in practice. So that led me to contacting the Church of Satan and joining eventually.
So could you clarify does the Church of Satan recognize Satan as some kind of spiritual, non-physical, or transdimensional being of any kind, or is it a symbol of, as you said, the carnal nature of the human?
It's the latter. It's a symbol of the carnal nature of the human.
Right.
One of the very first things you read in the Satanic Bible is all gods are fictions.
Right.
All deities, all religions are man-made. Mm-hmm. So like just from the get-go, that's laid out. So that said, religion is still an important part of the human experience. And we acknowledge the fact that, rituals, ceremonies, milestones, metaphors, symbols, these are all things that help us navigate our lives, express emotions and things like that aren't always easy to get across. And, they're best encapsulated in symbols and metaphors. So we choose a symbol of Satan as it is the symbol of materialism, right? Mm-hmm. In Christian ideology and in theology, actually, Satan is the ruler of the earth. Satan is, this world is damned, right? So there's no point in living for this life. You have to live for the other life. And in many religions, not just Christianity and Buddhism, right? It's about transcending this world. So Satan to us is one of many kind of symbols that represent this carnal world, this material world. And we don't acknowledge any kind of other dimension, other afterlife or anything like that. We focus on this world and living it to the fullest.
Fascinating. I have a follow-up question. Sorry to interrupt you, Tony, because you had mentioned that you felt when you first were exposed to it, you thought it was reactionary. And that's actually my question about why in particular then is Satan chosen as that symbol? Because it does seem to be reactive to Christianity, which basically created Satan. I mean, for the most part, because there are other references to Satan as it concerns astrology and the planet Saturn and stuff like that. But for the most part, so what is that? Is it? Tell me how it's not reactionary, or is it, and that's okay?
It is. I would say Satanism is fundamentally reactionary.
Oh,
it is
cool.
a reactionary philosophy because one of the big principles of Satanism is the very definition of the word Satan is the adversary. Mm-hmm. Right? You can't be an adversary if you don't have something to oppose, right? And one of the things we say is Satan is the best friend the church has ever had or God has ever had. It's kept them in business all these years. So there is this kind of balance, right, between things. LaVey, when he formulated the Church of Satan, he didn't really think about Christianity very much, and it's kind of funny to say that now since there's so much focus on Christianity. But he grew up secular, and he was actually reacting to the kind of hippie New Age spiritualism of the '60s, and he kind of saw Christianity on the way out with this kind of New Age philosophy that was just repackaging Christianity with crystals and meditation and stuff like that, and presenting it, in this white light religion. So he thought, okay, well, there needs to be an alternative both to Christianity and to this kind of New Age philosophy. So he developed Satanism because he saw that there was no actual formulated philosophy or religion called Satanism. There were accusations. There were some literary figures who used Satan as a metaphor, but there wasn't ever like an actual doctrine that said this is what Satanists believe, this is what Satanists do, written by Satanists, not by Christians or other people who are accusing other people of practicing Satanism. This was Satanism by Satanists. So it does play on a little bit of Christian symbolism, because in the West, I mean, it is the predominant religion. Well, it was, maybe we could argue that it's kind of on the waning side now, but there is still capital in that we can use and we can play with. We're not married to the idea of Satan. If you grew up in a Asian background, you might use a different symbol. If you grew up in a Native American background, you may use a different symbol. You may use coyote or something like that, depending on your background. Something that means something more to you, right? Or Loki, if you're from, a Scandinavian background. So you may play with different metaphors, but Satan to us is kind of is pretty universal. But we're open to interpretation.
Well, I find it fascinating because paganism, Wicca, how similar are these religions to Satanism? And I think a lot of religions kind of pick pieces from each other.
Yeah.
It's like Judaism, like, we picked from Christianity, pretty much came from Judaism. So,
yeah, it is. Well, Jesus was not a Christian.
Right.
He was a Jew.
So Christians remember that. But did Satanism, do they use a lot of rituals from pagan and maybe Wicca also?
Yeah, in our rituals, we would borrow from other pagan rituals or other fictional rituals, or like the works of H.P. Lovecraft. You had Peter Levanda on recently, and you might take it a little more seriously, but just it's fictional. But we can repurpose that those works in our ritual, because we believe these are all fictions anyway, right? So we can modify them and use them to our purposes. So in terms of Wicca, Wicca, came out in around the same era, right? And more or less, Wicca though has this kind of I forget what they call it, but if you curse somebody, it's going to bounce back and hit you, things like that. It's kind of they shun black magic and things like that.
Yeah, hexes.
Whereas Satanism doesn't have that. It says you should curse your enemies, you should destroy your enemies without guilt, without shame, and there's no karmic balance that's going to get back at you. So we all magic or all manipulation of events to the Satanist is egotistical. So it's all black magic, whether we want to heal somebody or heal ourselves or curse somebody. It's all the same. It's all manipulation of our of events through our will.
And so, can you explain, or how is magic experienced then? Is it that manipulation of your will and impressing situations then with the force of your own will? Is that essentially how magic is experienced or defined in Satanism?
More or less, yeah. I mean, there are many Satanists who see magic as purely psychodrama. It's purely psychoanalysis. It's therapeutic. It's a way of putting yourself in a controlled environment and letting out your anger, your sadness, your carnal lust. If these things become counterproductive, if they weigh down on you, you should have a place or a method in which you get that out of you, right? And then you can go on with your life in a productive manner. Now, that's, I guess, the base level, right? We can leave it at that. But some Satanists are they're interested in what can happen afterwards. If there is like an impression of the will out there, if there is some kind of effect in those kinds of things, and we leave the door open to that. We don't require anyone to believe in any of that. It's based on your experiences. If you're experimenting with ritual and magic and you experience things that are beyond coincidence, well, go and work that out and document it and figure it out. We're not saying that you shouldn't, but we're not saying that everyone should either.
I like that. Yeah. So it's basically there's a lot of personal sovereignty in.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, sovereignty is one of our key terms. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering about when you said that that Satanists don't acknowledge any other dimensions. What about, we are on Truth Be Told after all.
Right.
What about aliens and extra and interdimensionals? Is that something that is considered, or just like it's not a part of this particular religion?
It's part of our religion in the sense that we are open to the unknown,
Okay.
right? We acknowledge that science doesn't have the answers to everything at all times, right? There are things we don't fully understand about our experience, this reality,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's why when we talk about the unknown, we're still operating within this experience that we have, this world, this universe, nothing outside of it. Even though gravity, before it was fully understood by science, it still existed in this world. We just now know more about it. And actually, if we talk about quantum physics, we may know less about it now than we did before.
Right.
But so science is always changing, and we're open to that change, and we're open to experimenting with that. In terms of aliens, the Church of Satan actually operated a SETI at home project for many years, and I think it's still going. So there are plenty of Satanists who are interested in that.
Well, we have a chat room question, and I'm going to try to pronounce this as best I can. Anthony said, I'm assuming that he is talking about the Leviathan. Is that right? Satanism?
Leviathan,
Yeah, Leviathan. Oh, right.
Specifically, not just dark occultist and black magic and
Luciferianism,
yeah.
right.
So is that correct, is what you're...
Well, yeah, the Satanism was defined by LaVey. So to me, to say LaVeyan Satanism is kind of redundant. It's like saying, Jesus Christian or something like that. It's like,
right.
Buddhism. So yeah, Satanism was defined by LaVey. There was no Satanism before him. And this was researched by plenty of academics who actually didn't really like LaVey a lot. And they tried their darndest to try to find some kind of continuing legacy of Satanism before him, and they couldn't find it. So they all admit to that he did formulate it. Nowadays, everyone wants to, create their own thing and start off their own thing. As long as they call it something else and they define it on original terms, that's fine. But I'm not interested in that.
Not to be argumentative, but actually it was Emperor Constantine in 325 who created Christianity. It wasn't Jesus who defined Christianity.
He formulated
I guess he inspired Christianity. There we go.
Jesus did inspire Christianity. Sure.
Yes,
we can say it that way.
Yeah.
Well, if you go back to even 1939, if you watch the because I'm being from Kansas, The Wizard of Oz,
Mm-hmm.
we had the good witch and a bad witch, and I always think even Christianity, Wicca is even evil.
Oh, absolutely.
So I just think it's funny that it's such a beloved film that there was a lot of undertones in the movie that wasn't quite so much
Well, the other thing that's a part of our culture that I'm noticing about Satanism, the Western culture that would reflect the sort of Western Christian culture, is that like the filthy rich, and basically all of we have so many parables and legends that are about the rich man was the evil one, and the poor man and the martyr was the one who was the champion of this story. And Satanism, as the Leviathan Satanism, no, I'm just kidding. So could you speak to that, Raul, about that value or that tenet of experience in Satanism, that materialism, basically?
Yeah, I mean, one of the ideas of Satanism is that we should enforce our will on the world and be proud and not be meek. We value the strong over the meek and things like that. There's a lot of bombastic language in the Satanic Bible along those terms. So that's this idea that I noticed some people that come to say are attracted to the idea of Satanism or the occult and things like that. Their experience with Christians is that they're betraying the true gospel of Christ. Jesus or the Bible being that you should cherish the weak and the poor and the humble. And they said, well, these Christians, they're not living up to that. And well, Satanists, we're not trying to live up to that either. We reject the whole thing. We value material wealth, we value power, we value strength. These are all things that push the human race forward, and they're not always viewed in a good light. And that's okay. We're not trying to portray ourselves as good people, humble, meek people. No, it's not. Satanists are the movers and shakers in the world, and sometimes they can be nasty people.
That could be any religion. And the last time you were here, I was really fascinated, because, like I said, I always looked at Satanism, Church of Satan, pretty negative. But your organization, your particular organization, really are do-gooders. You give back to community. You give. Can you kind of tell our audience some of the things that you do in a community, that you're not just going in and trying to, sacrifice, small children. I mean, this is not what they do. This is, this is an organization that really you do good. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, yeah, you may have noticed my facial expression, but I don't like the term "do good."
Okay.
We're not gooders. We do as benefits us, right?
Right.
The Church of Satan doesn't do anything collectively. It doesn't do any kind of charity work or anything like that as a collective. It leaves those things up to the individual. So individuals who want to be active in charity or in, say, animal rescue, or be involved in environmental organizations and things like that's great. And we encourage individuals to pursue those interests. But we don't, say that, don't do it under the umbrella of the Church of Satan.
Got it.
As like, because not everyone might agree with that charity or agree with that cause. They may have polar opposite opinions on that. So as an individualistic philosophy, we leave that up to the individual. And any time those charities and things are done, the way we give back to our communities is ultimately a selfish thing, because we want a better environment for ourselves. We want a better community for ourselves. We want to feel safer. We want to be able to live a comfortable, indulgent life. So we would say this is this is all selfless. We don't believe in altruism. We don't believe in selfless pursuits of anything, right? Everything is done because we think we'll get something back from it, either ourselves or maybe our loved ones, our children, our grandchildren, people who are connected to us. We do have some extension of ourselves for sure, but but that gives us pleasure. We love to see our children happy, our family happy, if we care for our families. But those kinds of things ultimately feed back to yourself.
I noticed in a lot as I was looking at you have the statements, and then there were rules. And one of the tenets that I could really get behind is that there's a belief that all churches should be taxed. And I think that I completely agree with that. And that's, especially if you consider, I think it's Joel Osteen has I don't even know, a 300,000 acre, mansion and helicopters and airplanes. I shouldn't ascribe all of those details to Osteen, but I know that they have a phenomenal property, and I don't think it's all just from the books that he writes. So, yeah, can you expand upon that understanding and belief?
Yeah, because we view all religions to be man-made. Mm-hmm. There's no divine inspiration in any of them. So they're all businesses, or they're all functions of institutions. So we believe that they all should be taxed. The Church of Satan pays its taxes on all of its doings. So we challenge other organizations to do the same. And we think that that's the best way of giving back to the community.
What about nonprofit organizations that aren't specifically religious? Is there an opinion about that?
Yeah, I think that's up to the individual. If they feel those are necessary, those are, if they feel like those were ultimately net goods and things like that. Yeah, I'll donate to environmental causes and things like that. And there are other organizations I donate to that, offer me or kind of benefit me or benefit things I believe in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what is the membership like? And is there, you mentioned, paying taxes. So is there like what is called in the Christian church tithing? Is there some sort of way that the conference is supported by its membership? Is there an ordination process for people who have these separate congregations? Does it model other religious organizations in some ways?
No, it doesn't. It's actually very different than in any other religion in that sense. We have a one-time membership fee. That's it. And we screen for individuals who want to be more active in the organization. So you have to fill out forms to become an active member. Because many people join the Church of Satan not really to join an organization, but just to say, to tip the hat and say, hey, thanks for being around. We like what you do. And they join as a kind of symbolic gesture. So then we like to say that Satanists are non-joiners. So we're okay with that. But those who might want to be more active in the organization, who might want to be a representative or might want to organize with other members to work on projects, we screen for that. But that's basic. This is not like there's no like initiation. You don't complete these rituals and walk in a circle 13 times and say this or that. There's nothing of that sort. It's just a matter of are you productive? Are you actually applying Satanism in the real world? Are you getting results? Are you successful in your career, in academia, in your art? What are you doing that expands the philosophy into the real world? And those are the things we look for. Those are the kinds of results we want, not, do you memorize these rituals or not?
And so are there buildings, are there regular meetings of some kind? Is there something organized in that function? Like, how do you experience it? Is it just your personal experience, or are there gatherings?
It's a very personal experience. For most members, it's a very personal, solitary experience because we are highly individualistic. We are outsiders. We're not these kind of group hug kind of people who need to get together every weekend. So there is no congregational kind of sense. We do have occasional gatherings. We had one on our 50th anniversary and 50th year, so 50, 51. That was very rare thing we did. We got together in Washington, D.C. What, should I have said that? I don't know. But anyway, we had the 666 event, right? That was a semi kind of public event. And there are also personal gatherings. I've gotten together with other members and conducted rituals, and we had dinner and partied and things like that, watch movies. But these are close-knit groups, right? These are small meta tribes that we compose of our own interests, right? I may not be interested in the things that other members are interested in, so I'm not required to get along with them or meet with them or anything like that.
What about full moons, red moons, certain times of the year, astrology? Do you have any rituals that you do maybe as an individual compared to as a group, or even just a small group of people on these certain astrological moments?
Well, not so much astrological. No, we're pretty skeptical of that, but there are days that are important that are symbolically important. Things like Walpurgisnacht on April 30th. But the most important day of the calendar to us is our own birthdays, being the egoists that we are. That would make sense. But Halloween and things like that, the solstice and the equinoxes, those can be big days for the individual, and they may have rituals and get-togethers. More often than not, it's going to be a get-together. It's going to be a party. We'll get together at a restaurant or a club or something like that. So that's the kind of thing that we do.
What about religion? I mean, not race inside the Church of Satan. I know you're Latino, but there are other races. Why, Asian? Is there racism inside of Church of Satan?
No, absolutely not. I mean, the core fundamental principle of Satanism is individualism, is being against collectivism and herd thinking. So that wouldn't make much sense.
Right.
No, we judge people not by their ethnicity, but by their merits. You know, what are you? Again, it goes back to what are you doing in the real world? How successful are you in implementing your will? And you know, being of any race doesn't grant you any particular credit in any way, one way or another. It's a matter of what are you doing to apply Satanism in the real world. And we do have members of every background all over the world. We are an international organization, so yeah, that's never been a part of our philosophy.
And so the founder, the LeVay, this person, is he passed now?
Yeah, he passed
Okay.
in 1996,
Okay.
97. Yeah.
And so is it like an heir or his family who are if we call this basically a business, the owner, you know, how is it, or who is the, you know, that mouthpiece or headpiece of it at this point?
No, LeVay, I think it was LeVay who said, merit, not inherit. No, so there is no kind of like passing along of that kind of thing. The current leaders of the organization are Peter H. Gilmore and Peggy Nadramia, high priest and high priestess. They live in New York, and they have a black house in New York where the Church of Satan is headquartered, and they organize these kinds of interviews, and they organize media, press. They do court appearances. They do legal matters, all kinds of things that require, you know, an administrative branch of the Church of Satan. So, you know, they do some of that themselves, and they have other people that help them with that. But, you know, they became the representatives of the organization through hard work. It was Peter Gilmore who ran the Black Flame, and when Anton LaVey passed, you know, there was a bit of turmoil at the time to see what would happen, because it's a big thing. It's for a very young religion, you know, for its founder to pass. Many religions don't get past that step. You know, many religions, you know, kind of fade away after their founders because they're cults of personality. The Church of Satan did not have that happen. There was a little bit of turmoil, but everyone turned to Peter Gilmore and Peggy Nadramia. LaVey's partner, Blanche Barton, she ran the Church of Satan for a little while after his death. But you know, she was raising a kid, and she was going through all these legal things with his passing and his estate. So she passed that on to Peter and Peggy, who continue running the organization today. And I'm very proud to have them as friends and to work with them.
And so there are employees then? Sorry, I have so many questions because I find it also fascinating. Now, you referred to them as high priest and high priestess. So how did they, if there is no real ordination, how did they, and do others become priests or reverends or something like that? I'm just fascinated with that bit as well.
Yeah, so the way it works is anyone can join the Church of Satan. You apply, you go through that, and become a registered member. Well, there are instances where we will reject membership. You know, if you're a crazy person, you know, in your application, clearly we'll reject you. But you become a registered member. If you want to be an active member, you have to put in another application and be screened for that. Once you're an active member, you go about your life. Go about, like I said, school, work, art, whatever it is that you're doing, go about that business. Be the best you that you can be. And let the Church of Satan know. Let them know, hey, I got this promotion at my job, or hey, I'm doing this gallery event. I'm on TV. I've got these credits here and there. So let the organization know. Keep them up to date on what you're doing, and they will acknowledge those real world accomplishments by giving you a promotion within the organization. So it's
that's cool.
Active member, and then warlock or witch, and then priest or priestess or reverend.
I see.
And then on top of that is a magister or magistra. And then on top of that is high priest and high priestess. So there's only one high priest and one high priestess, and below that, members work their way up. But it's always through real world accomplishments. It's never like some kind of exam you take. It's what are you doing in the material world.
Is there, I guess, maybe just an assumption that the Book of Satan or whatever other works of LaVey's are understood in order to, continue to progress up, or it's just like whatever, like you said, there's no test, so understanding the tenets or the philosophies, is that somehow, I don't know, empirical in the fact that they just are reporting to the church?
I mean, that kind of stuff, it shows, right? And
Okay, yeah.
if you're contacting the Church of Satan, you're saying, hey, I conducted all the rituals in the satanic rituals and conducted all the rituals in the satanic scriptures, and what do you think? What do you guys think? And
Okay.
it's a kind of, you'll get feedback that's saying, hey, that's nice and all, but what are you doing? And because that's generally, that's embedded in the philosophy, right? It's that kind of stuff shows very easily. You will get occasionally people who have the wrong idea about Satanism, but they will eventually kind of weed themselves out because they're not getting that kind of fulfillment. Some people do want some kind of initiatory organization, right? They want to feel like they're moving their way up in some occult organization and something like that, and they're not going to get that in the Church of Satan, so they'll eventually find something else that fits them.
Well, we have
Right?
we have a lot of comments and people talking in our chat room, and majority actually is very interesting and open to what you're saying. And of course, there's those people that look at it as a negative force. And what's the biggest misconception that you think that people see as a Church of Satan compared to certain radical, satanic groups?
Well, I would, when you say radical satanic groups, I don't really
Well, it's
know.
like radical Christians, because some of them get pretty crazy.
Well, I mean, are there actually groups that so there are people who gather and they do unspeakable acts and all of that kind of thing, and they're referred to as Satanists, but do they actually, I mean, I've never known this. Are there actually people who say we're Satanists and we, murder children? Do you know,
I mean,
Raul,
maybe.
if that's actually a thing, or is that just like propaganda from, evangelicals?
It's propaganda, and it's propaganda because
Yeah.
a lot of these, there have been cases of people who commit these crimes in the name of Satan and things like that. But where do they get that idea? They're not getting it from the Satanic Bible. They're not getting it from any materials that are satanic. They're getting those ideas from the preacher. They're getting those ideas from movies, from and a lot of those movies are written by Christians and appeal to a Christian audience who are scared by these things. So,
or just capitalists who,
Right.
Yeah,
understand that kind of
what it
fear
is,
is yeah, exactly.
yeah, Satan sells. So they're, they'll capitalize on that. And so you'll have people, a lot of these people are mentally ill, they're, and they commit these crimes based on what they think Satanists should be doing. And, that has nothing to do with our philosophy, and nothing to do with the Church of Satan. During the Satanic Panic, there was a lot of fear that there was this kind of organized, ring of Satanists that were committing these crimes against children and things like that. And there was an investigation in that, and there was no such thing. They did find crimes against children, but those were committed by Christians. Those are mentally deranged Christians. So we like to say that people who are devil worshippers, people who actually worship Satan, well, they're really just reverse Christians. They buy into the Christian theology. They just took the other side. So you're just some kind of heretical Christian. That's all it is.
And so, actually, I just wanted to point this out because I hear this in it, and I'm referring to some people who may be not really paying that close attention, which is, I think, probably an occupational hazard for you, is that the Church of Satan doesn't actually worship Satan in the traditional sense, or the generally understood sense. If anything, it's just embracing what the symbol of Satan is, which is the carnal self. So it's embracing and enhancing and right? Is that there's no real
absolutely.
worship. Worship, I kind of bristle at the idea of worship anyway, because that's putting sovereignty outside of yourself, and that's just irresponsible.
Yeah, one of our mottos is Satan demands study, not worship. So we may worship ourselves, or in a ritual sense, we may,
Celebrate, maybe.
visualize Satan, but it's just it's an externalization of the self. It's all psychoanalysis. It's psychodrama. It's a way of self hypnosis in some ways. Ritual is.
Yeah.
So you're taking these things about you and you're externalizing it. So we do have rituals. If you read the ritual part of the Satanic Bible, or you read the book, The Satanic Rituals, people will say, hey, here it says you said hail Satan, and you said Satan, ruler of the earth, and you call upon these demons. Clearly you believe in that. But that's out of context. It's these things are all projections of your personality in a situation, in an environment where you're free to live in that fantasy. But these are all fantasies at the end of the day. They're all just ways of expressing the human experience. There's no actual anthropomorphic Satan or anything like that. So, but like I said, going back to the beginning of our interview, there is still power in symbols. So one of the other misconceptions, I talked about the satanic panic and satanic murderers and things like that being a misconception. The other misconception on the other side is that we're just pure atheists. We're just doing this as a prank. We're just doing this as a joke. This is just trolling or something like that. And that's a misconception as well. No, Satanism is a real philosophy and a real religion to us. Satan is a symbol that has meaning to us. We do formulate rituals and ceremonies around that. We do use it in our art, in our day-to-day life. We may visualize that kind of idea of Satan in one way or another. So it's not just atheism, trolling Christians. That's not our purpose. That doesn't give us pleasure, pissing off Christians. That's rather annoying at times, actually. So we are trying to be the best people that we can be, and that is Satanism to us.
Well, we only have just a few more minutes left, and I can't believe it's gone this fast already. But let's say that there's people that really maybe not want to join, but to really get to know what your church is about. Where can they go? What can they read? What can they look into to just get a better understanding of who you are, the church itself?
Well, you go to churchofsatan.com. We have tons of essays, interviews, articles, news items. It's just, we got links to our YouTube channel. It's got a bunch of videos there. You could check out our Twitter. It's at Church of Satan. It's the verified Twitter account there, so it's us. Lots of interesting insight on pop culture and current events going on there. So I recommend that. So churchofsatan.com would be the main go-to, though. Okay. That's where you'll get all the sources.
Perfect. And that's one thing about Truth Be Told. We touch on topics that are sometimes controversial. I don't really think this is more of a controversial. It's just really getting to know. It's
a philosophy,
a philosophy and
or
understanding.
Or a religion, sure.
So I once again, you were great, and I hope you come back again.
Do we have time for me to ask
one
quick
more question?
Because one of the rules is do not kill non-human animals unless you are attacked or for food.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just non-human animals mentioned here. What about human animals? Is that a rule to not kill them unless attacked?
Yeah, I mean it's be rational about it.
Okay.
In a self-defense scenario.
Okay.
Do what you need to do to.
So it doesn't need to be mentioned as much as non-human animals, probably because of the whole dominion thing in Christianity. So okay, I was just curious.
Oh no, we don't believe that. We believe. We may even value animal life over human life in many ways.
Amen.
There's
Me
a lot
too.
more people that probably think that way these days too. All right. Well, thank you so much, Raul. Thank you so much for being on Truth Be Told once again. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, you guys. Well, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's always topics that we're going to touch on that may not feel just right to you, but we appreciate you for having an open mind and coming and listen to everybody's journeys and their religions and their philosophies. So, Tricia, thank you so much. How do people find you?
My website is triciacarcharm.com. I am an intuitive and animal communicator, and I have a show right here on UBN called Charmed Life with Tricia Carr, all about metaphysics and mysticism.
She's great, and hope you guys check her out every Sundays. And we want to appreciate you and say next time we have another show coming up right after this. But until then, this is Truth Be Told. Talk to you soon.